It's going. We're going to see what happens here.
Yeah, I've got a little light up that says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook. So evidently it worked.
No. I'm working. Thanks, though. my niece and my young son just came in.
Bring the Legos in.
We're going to see what happens here.
Yeah, I've got a little light up that says meeting is now streaming live on Facebook.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Okay, there we go. All right. I think it is working. We have 44 people already watching us, so that's great. So I think it worked. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm super excited for this particular Facebook Live because it includes 3 of my favorite people, and they're actually they're nice people, which is also awesome too. But their creative talent, has no bounds. And first, I just want to say thank you for joining us. This should be a fun hour and maybe a little bit more. And I'm going to let each person introduce themselves. Thank you for joining us. You can go ahead, Robin.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you go.
Hobb. I'm a fantasy novelist. I also write as Megan Lindholm. Robin Hobb tends towards the end of the epic fantasy slice of the genre, and Megan Lindholm loves urban fantasy.
Hour and maybe a little bit more. And there you go. Sorry, that was back reverb. Magali, you want to go?
Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm Magali and I'm French, which you will be able to hear that all along. So I'm an illustrator. I've been a professional illustrator for 15 years now, and I'm mainly working for, fantasy and all that kind of cool stuff, things, starting from many people know me for my Magic the Gathering work, but I also work for lots of fantasy books like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings, things like that, and the Farseer Trilogy.
Great. And now Tommy.
Hi, I'm Tommy Arnold. I'm also an illustrator, the junior illustrator of the 2 of us here in the group. I think I've been full-time freelance for about 6 years now, and I also like to paint robots and wizards.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, which you're in the middle of doing right now, actually, probably for both. Let's start this off first with Robin and with let's start with Megan Lindholm.
Very well.
And let's talk about who Robin Hobb is and who Megan Lindholm is, because they are kind of 2 very different type of writers. So I would hope you, if you can go into the history of their duality, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. When I first began writing, I used just the initial M and Lindholm, my maiden name, because that's where I was at the time. I began writing fantasy as Megan Lindholm when I was 30. That's about 38 years ago. And for the most part, I wrote sword and sorcery type stories. Sometimes I ventured into semi-quasi historical fantasy. But although the work got nice reviews, but the sales were absolutely mediocre. When I began writing the Farseer Trilogy, it was in a totally different slice of the fantasy genre, and I was using a very different voice. And I don't remember if it was my agent or it was my editor, but the discussion came up of why don't we use a different pseudonym for this series? So we had a great deal of fun inventing the name Robin Hobb, and we went through lots of things like going into a bookstore to make sure I would be
let's talk about
on the eye level shelf rather than at the bottom with Zelazny or at the top with Asimov. I wanted a short name so that it would be on the cover in big letters. We chose Hobb for all kinds of wonderful reasons, from hobgoblin to put the kettle on the hob. And Robin, of course, has all kinds of nice nuances, from the first Robin of Spring to Robin Goodfellow, who is also Puck. So we had a great time inventing the name. And because I do write in 2 very different tones, Megan Lindholm is more, a little bit darker. and more does a lot more urban fantasy. And then Robin Hobb has stayed pretty much in the epic fantasy area. And that makes it easier for readers to know what they're getting when they buy a book. So the most recent one to come out under the Megan Lindholm name, other than some short stories I'm very proud of in the magazines, would be the reissue of Wizard of the Pigeons, which was first published in the 1980s and is set in downtown Seattle.
Right. All right. Yeah. And it's, I like to say that it's one of the earliest examples of urban fantasy in the modern sense of urban fantasy. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to write Wizard of the Pigeons? I mean, there's numerous reasons to write a book, of course, but you know, urban fantasy wasn't really a big thing then, so there was no marketing, there was no way to look at the market and say, well, urban fantasy is hot right now, so I should try to take advantage. That wasn't true. So can you talk a little bit about why you wrote Wizard of the Pigeons?
I lived in various places, you know, California when I was a kid, mostly Fairbanks, a little bit of Kodiak Island, sometimes spent in Denver, sometimes spent in Hawaii. But Seattle was the first time that I really had started to explore a large city. And Seattle has such a fascinating history from being a boom town for logging. The original Skid Road was in Seattle because we skidded logs down the hill. And it struck me as I was wandering around that it had the same feeling as walking into an old forest, that there were nooks and crannies and odd places that felt unsafe, other places that felt very welcoming. And I thought this would be a great setting for something magical. I mean, why are we setting all the magic in the far distant past when we should have magic going on today? At the same time, I was of the generation where I saw my high school friends being drafted and going off to Vietnam for that conflict, and coming back as very changed people. The unfunny joke was that they came back and they were missing in action still, that they were not the people that had gone away. So I wanted an unusual hero for this fantasy. And I suppose those are the roots for Wizard, that I wanted to write something about what I saw happening to my friends and to other veterans. And I wanted to set it in a city. And the magic, the changes, that sending a young man off to war and then bringing him home, what happens there? It's pretty, I'm sure it's not a huge secret that it changes people and that PTSD can change them radically. So those are all the bits and roots of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it was a powerful book. I mean, I read it, oh man, probably 15 years ago. I think for the first time I found a beat up old paperback in a small bookstore, you know, and my father was a vet, and I always remember it really striking me then. And then now that my father has passed away, and I read it, you know, a year and a half ago when we were preparing it for this new edition that's illustrated by Tommy, I remember just bawling my eyes out like 2 or 3 different times, because it struck me as different. I mean, I'm a different person now than 15 years ago. You went back over the book too. Is there anything that when you look at that book, is there anything you would change necessarily from when the time it was written compared, you know, who you are now compared to then? The veterans' plight now versus then, has anything changed on that front?
Well, when I drive into Seattle now, I see a lot more blue tarps and camps off to the side of the freeway. Our homeless problem has become extremely large, and a lot of them are military veterans still. And so if I were writing it today, I think it would be darker, if anything. And as a writer, I have learned to take my time and put in more detail. And as a result, I think it would be a much longer book if I were trying to write that story today.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. So you spent a number of years writing as Megan Lindholm.
Yes.
You were nominated for awards for your short stories and several of your books. And then you shifted gears and wrote as Robin Hobb, and you wrote Assassin's Apprentice. I'm wondering if you'll talk just a little bit about why you decided to make that shift, into Robin Hobb, and what it was about Fitz that has kind of taken over your life in a huge way. You've been writing him now for several decades.
Yes. I think that's a harder one to put my finger on. When I started writing the Farseer Trilogy, I think every story, many things that happen off the edges of the pages, and many things
like just a little bit.
Many things happen after the story.
Right.
With Fitz, for years and years, there was just a scrap of paper in my desk drawer back when I was using a typewriter, and the scrap of paper said, "What if magic was addictive and the addiction was totally destructive?" And every now and then I would take that scratch of paper out and look at it and say, there's a story here. It took me a long time for the characters and the setting and everything else to coalesce around that idea. But that is the tiny germ from which the Farseer Trilogy grew.
Right. All right. And we're going to move to Magali now, because I think she started her work on illustrating some of your books before Tommy did for Wizard. So I'm going kind of in chronological order here. Magali, can you talk a little bit about how you were approached to do this major project from Del Rey? For those of you who are watching right now, Del Rey several years ago started publishing fully illustrated, really nice editions of that original Farseer trilogy. And the third one, Assassin's Quest, comes out Tuesday. Some of you have already picked up your copies because some bookstores ignore on sale dates, but it comes out Tuesday. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got involved with the project and what that felt like on this major series that so many people, it's a beloved series, and how you went about producing the beautiful work that you've done.
Maybe first I should tell a little story. It's that years before I was contacted for working on the Farseer Trilogy, I met Robin in an event in Belgium, and I knew she would be there. And I was already a big fan of the Farseer Trilogy. I was reading the book when I met her. And yeah, I was a major fan of the story and all. It had a big impact on me, I gotta say. So what I wanted to do was to give her a gift in exchange of the wonderful moments I was having with her story. So I made a pencil sketch of Fitz, and I told myself, okay, if I find the courage to go and talk to her, I'm gonna give her the sketch. And what happened was that during this event, I had an exhibition of my illustrations, and I was busy hanging the frames and all when one of the people from the organization came, and Robin was with her. I don't even remember what the organization woman was looking like, I gotta say. I was like, oh my God, that's the moment. It was really unexpected, and also I was a bit nervous, but so happy I would be able to meet her. So I don't really remember what I told her at that moment, but I know that I was able to tell her, okay, I got something for you. And I gave her the sketch. So that's how it kind of started. But after that, many years passed, and actually the story of me being contacted for the book is really short. I just received an email. It was in 2018, and I received this email, and it was like, I don't know. What I really want to say right now is that this project is not just like any other project in my career. I've been lucky enough to work with lots of wonderful people and lots of incredible writers for lots of incredible books and stories and all. But this one was the one story whenever someone was asking me, what would be one of your craziest wishes as an illustrator? The first thing I was answering all the time was the Farseer Trilogy, because it meant so much for me as a reader. I'm a reader before being an illustrator for this story, really. And yeah, when it happened, the fun part of it was I received this email. I was like, you know, not breathing at all for a few minutes. And then I went downstairs to tell my husband, and I was like, oh, crying. And at first he thought that somebody died because what's happening? What's happening? What's wrong? And I'm gonna work on Assassin's Apprentice. Oh my God. So yeah, that's how it started. And I promise you, I'm not even exaggerating. That's really how I reacted to that. So that's how it started.
How did your husband react to your reaction?
You know, my husband is the kind of guy who, you know, when he understood it was a reaction of happiness, he was like, yeah, of course. It was so obvious to him for some reason, but you know, but you don't realize what it means.
Right. So do you remember, well, I should ask first before we get into the illustrations and the work that you've done. At that point, did you reach out to Megan or Robin about this? And did you guys work together at all? How did the steps of the process work between you two, I guess? Or did you work together? I don't even know.
Actually, because I was working for a publisher also, I never really allowed myself to contact Robin directly. Because I thought that it was better this way. So I always was writing messages to the woman who was in charge of the project at Del Rey, and she would forward my emails to Robin, because I had to keep Del Rey in the loop. So that's how we were working.
I had asked for Magali because they did say, what illustrators would you like for this? And so I had asked for Magali, and I was thrilled when they said, oh, yes, yeah, she said, yes, you can have her. So it was just wonderful for me. It was definitely something where I was absolutely thrilled to get an artist I had requested. So.
And what was it like for you, Robin?
That was the incredible part for me, what Robin is telling here, because, you know, when you are looking for an illustrator for a book like this, you can have absolutely anyone, I think. I mean, I don't know a lot of illustrators in the fantasy genre who would say no to the Farseer Trilogy, I think. And the idea that she would ask for me was something it took time for me to, you know, to process in my head, because yeah, I mean, why me? But I'm really happy she did.
So what was it like, Robin, when you started getting those first emails from Del Rey featuring some of the, I'm assuming they were sketches to start off with that you would approve and send back to Del Rey, then Del Rey would contact Magali and say, go ahead, or whatever changes. What was it like for you seeing this world that you've spent so much time in coming to life in a very different way than it has been in the past?
Well, one of the first things that the publisher suggested was that I should come up with scenes that I wanted to see illustrated. And that seemed a bit backwards to me, because I always think the artist should find the scene that speaks most directly to them, something they want to draw, rather than being dictated by the writer, you will draw this. So there was some back and forth on that. But I think that for the most part, Magali selected the moments that she would bring to life. And there was always a little bit of back and forth about, what was it? a plant that I did not think would be growing in Shade's room, for example, because he doesn't have a lot of light in there. I think that was one of the things where I said, well, I'm not sure about that. But I don't think I ever had any qualms about the actual depiction of the characters. Magali, do you remember if anything in the back and forth, if there was ever anything I said, this person should be taller or shorter or something like that? I don't think there was. I think you nailed it from the beginning.
The truth is I was really surprised by the freedom I was given for the book, starting from being able to choose the actual scenes. The main request that was given to me for choosing the scenes that they shouldn't be too close one to the other, so there would be a good, I don't know how it's said in English, but there
Just
wouldn't be
out through the book, yes.
yeah. So that was something I had to think about. But starting from that, it was like a huge playground. I could choose like whatever I liked. And I was also, I wouldn't say really surprised, but because from my experience, the more like experienced the writer is, and the more able they are to understand what Robin just explained, that is, you should leave some freedom to the artists. That's the best way to get the most of the artist's work, because it's sometimes it doesn't do any good when you have really precise, I want this and I want this and I want this, and then when you are the illustrator, you cannot express yourself. And I think that in this case it was, I think, a really good choice, because I really did know the books really well. I had read them multiple times before starting to work on them and all. So I really had a clear idea of what I would like to see, but also I think what could be important to readers too. Because I never lost sight that I was not doing that just for myself. I knew that there lots of fans were waiting for, might be waiting for some illustrations. So I never lost sight of that, what they would want to see, what would be dear to them. And here it was easy for me to answer that question, because I love the story so much and I knew what was dear to my heart. So that's what I tried to do. Actually, I got to say that for each book of the series, I had to choose 10 illustrations, but each time I had a first list of like 30 illustrations ideas for each book, and I had to narrow it down to only 10. And I don't even remember Del Rey or Robin ever telling me, no, we're not sure about that. They just say, okay, go on. So it was right. It was a really cool collaboration for that, but also sometimes I was a little bit lost, because I was, are they really happy with what I'm giving here? I'm not sure, because that's so much freedom. So it was a little, that's how I felt mainly for book one. But after, I was used to the process, so it was better for me and I felt more at ease. But when we started, I was anticipating lots of pieces of advice here and here, and didn't get any. So
how do you so I'm going to switch to Tommy here really quick, based upon what Magali just said. And I suspect I know what your answer is, Tommy, but I bet you enjoy that same kind of freedom also. Your best work happens when you're emotionally invested in the work in some way, and the art direction is more hands-off than it is hands-on. Can you talk a little bit about your process and how that has worked?
Yeah, without a doubt. I totally agree with everything Magali's been saying about getting the best work out when you take that sort of approach, and what Megan / Robin said about it, which is just that the artist is, we're all artists of just different types, and the visual artist has to connect with the thing. So when I'm doing a book, I almost, in some ways, I mentally have to take the opposite approach, what Magali was just describing, in that I don't really worry about what anyone else would want to see because it's too much pressure. I just kind of go into a real like greedy mode where I'm like, yeah, this stuff is awesome, and you get real selfish and oh yeah, I gotta draw this thing. And I find that illustrated books are a chance to do a type of illustration that I really enjoy. I started out working in this field with Irene Gallo over at Tor.com, working on short fiction, and the job of the piece is just to play with and enhance the story and maybe get a little interest. It's not to sell a book. There was no profit margins built into Tor.com at that time, and so it's a kind of illustration that I really love, and it goes back to some of the illustrators I love, like Bernie Fuchs, who illustrating magazine spreads in the 60s and things like that. Just really different types of compositions. You don't have to do the figure in the middle looking awesome every time. You can, we did that shot of the army man, just tiny in the grass for Wizard of the Pigeons. And we did pictures where the faces were totally obscured. And they're really fun playgrounds. I find these kinds of projects to be playgrounds. So yeah, I like it when, I basically take them on the assumption no one's going to tell me what to do. That might sound awful, but with covers, you very much like, yes, we please the editor, please the author, please the art director, we sell the book. I need to be happy with it too. So there's a lot. And then these books, these projects, which I've done actually 3 of these illustrated books this year, and kind of alternating that with major covers, they feel like a very different but quite enjoyable kind of challenge. And I'm the same as Magali in that I read the book, and I'm not a huge reader of the genre now, kind of on just because I read everything I work on, even if it's just the cover. And so I read a lot of it, but just what I'm given. And in that way, it kind of keeps my bandwidth. I don't know. I guess it's easy for me to fall in love with a book because I don't read that many of them. So when I get one, I'm like, oh yeah, this is dope. So I'm not like, oh, this is a tired depiction of dragons. How droll. Like I'm really excited every time. And so like I've got just like a little moleskin, and right now I'm working on one of these, and it's the same. It's just like, as I read through the book, just write down everything that has a big impact and star the ones that you're like, I have to draw this. And then when I'm working on the same challenge that Magali was describing of making sure the images are distributed evenly through the book, you basically find out, okay, which of these ones that I starred am I going to hang the pagination upon? These are the immovable columns of my design for the book. And then what needs to go in between, and where do pictures need to sit? And at that point, you're basically just solving for variables of how can I draw the most dope stuff I thought of and still do the job, actually fulfill the needs of the job.
Yeah. So you obviously, I'll let Robin go. Robin?
What are the other 2 books that you did illustrations for? Because you just mentioned you've done 3 projects. What are the other 2?
Mm-hmm. So I did an illustrated edition of the Murderbot omnibus for Subterranean Press, and we are following that up with the full novel Network Effect this year as well. So I'm actually just a few days away from deadline on that one. So I've been drawing a lot of robots right now.
And Subterranean Press puts out such a beautiful, beautiful product. That's incredible to be hooked up with them.
Yeah, and and the project we did together with Sean was great too. I really love being a part of, one of the nice things with these projects is you really feel like part of a team. And, at the end, the product isn't, I know how to make the pictures, but I don't have access to I can't distribute it and make sure it makes money and make sure that it's beautifully designed. Sean had just the greatest designer on Wizard of the Pigeons. I loved how it looked and how everything was treated. And so with covers, you're like, all right, it's going to be on a hardback and then might end up on trade paperback and they might move the type around. But with these, it's like, this is the thing, there's this object that we're building, like a sacred little tome that people can have and who already cherish the thing. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, even with the cover, we did a cover that I don't know would have been that easy to approve in like a generalized market where the book didn't already have. But, we're trying to appeal in some ways to people who already know this book and also new people. So the parameters are a little bit different in a way that's pleasant.
Right. Yeah. So I'll ask Magali here. So, Tommy just got done saying that he prefers to read the book before he, or read the project before he begins illustrating. While he's reading, he's taking notes. When you found out that you were going to get the Farseer trilogy and doing illustrations, did you immediately crack open Assassin's Apprentice again and start rereading at that moment and started taking you knew what scenes you wanted to do, but did they come from your reread at that point, or?
Yeah, I wouldn't call that a reread, because the fact is that when I was contacted for Assassin's Apprentice, and it was also the case during all 3 books process, I was like working with like 5 to 6 other simultaneous clients at the same time. So I was extremely busy during the whole 2.5 years. I got to work on the Farseer trilogy, but there is a wonderful tool. It's called audiobooks, and I really do love the Farseer trilogy French audiobooks. The guy's voice is incredible. It's so incredible that now I think that it's actually fits his voice in real life. He's doing really good. So I kept re-listening to the story I already knew. And it was a really good tool for, getting inside the universe, because I didn't have to do anything. The words kept coming at me all day long, because, it's like 15 to 20 hours of listening for such books. So I went through the audiobooks like 2 or 3 more times during the whole process. So I wouldn't miss anything. And of course, I had both editions next to me, the French one, it's the easiest one for me, and also the US one, just for distribution matters, because in France, books are split in many slices for some reason. We don't have just 3 books, we have a dozen or something like that for the trilogy. So I also wanted to learn how the books were actually cut in the original version, which I didn't really know. I wasn't sure, at least. So I really needed to know about that. So yes, I meant for 2 years, I was living in the trilogy, sleeping with the trilogy. That's all I was thinking about. Yeah.
Robin, do you have any questions for our artist friends?
I'll insert something about why the books grow so much. Arnold is my translator, my French translator that I'm extremely fond of, and he's done an amazing job. But he said that when you translate a book from English to French, it grows by sometimes as much as a third in length. And the other thing he pointed out was that a French sentence is usually much longer than a sentence in English. So sometimes he had to take 2 short sentences and combine them into one beautiful French sentence. And the feedback I get on his translation is that it's absolutely gorgeous.
It is. It really is. It really gives the feeling that you are not losing the soul of the book. And I did read also the English versions, because I really wanted to make sure what I was feeling in French was close to the original version. And it really is. I mean, the feeling coming through is really the same, in my opinion, at least.
So I do have a question, and it is for both of you, and that is, I know that some artists work now almost entirely with digital tools, and other artists are still pencil sketch and then paint. And I know so little of illustration. I cannot tell how these illustrations were created, if they began as paintings or if they began as sketches and then you use digital tools to create them. And so I'm very curious about that.
Tommy?
Yes.
My assumption from looking at your work is that we're both just digital all the way, pretty much, Magali. I mean, I see paintbrushes in the background, but your finished works are entirely digital, I assume, right? And mine are too.
Yeah, my illustrations are fully digital, especially for schedule matters. Because at first, before being a digital artist, I'm a traditional artist. But I soon in my career, I realized that if I wanted to to have enough projects to make a living, I had to give up on, oil painting and all, because it's taking too long to dry and to fix and to revise and all, especially because I'm in France. So I had to find the quickest way to send my illustrations to US clients or Japanese clients and all. And I realized that, and it was 15 years ago, I made this choice at the very beginning of my career. It really was a choice. Even if my digital skills were not as good as my traditional skills at the time, but I knew I had to improve, to be as quick as possible and all. Even if it's, I'm not really much quicker as a digital artist. For example, for a one illustration, any illustration from the Farseer Trilogy represents about 10 good hours for sketch phase, which I had to do digitally also, which made me really sad, but I was so busy at that time. So about 10 years of sketching to find, the composition. And on Farseer Trilogy, there also is a big work of character and costume designs. So I had to work on that first. And after that, it represents about 30 to 40, and for Farseer Trilogy, sometimes 45 hours for just the color phase. It was a huge work because I wanted them to be so detailed and all. So, but in general, that's what it would take me to paint an actual oil thing. The only bright side is that I don't have to wait for it to dry. So that's the only thing I'm getting, but that's the only difference.
For me, there's a little, I don't really do any other type of art. Like I didn't decide to become an artist till very late in my life compared to most people that work in the field. And when I was 20, I found out you could do art on a computer, and no one had told me that before. And I was like, that's awesome. And that was like when I decided to become an artist. So I'm very backwards to many people in that, like, I'll be drawing on the computer, and then I remember having to learn traditional tools, and I was like slow and bad with them in the way that a lot of people are when they first get onto the computer. So a lot of my learning and things in here are kind of scrambled up because of that. But I just love painting on the computer because I feel it moves at the speed of my thought, and I'm constantly trying to push the process to be more quick, more immediate, more rapid in ways that, and of course that can be done with traditional painting, but there's just something about sitting at this interesting point where you're part of a field that's almost as ancient as the human race, right? Art, visual art, going back as far as we can find it, pretty much in the ground, there's art. And then, but this new way of doing it that's only like 30 years old and was invented during my lifetime. So you're at the same time dealing with something like completely anachronistic and fresh and interesting, and also it's ancient. So you have all kinds of things to be interested in, and that's the best part about this career for me. Is it's just so interesting, and it's fascinating, and it's enjoyable in so many ways, and getting to interface with all the stories that people like Megan and or Robin write and things like that adds this whole other layer. But I do all my sketches in the computer. Sean will have seen those, and maybe he passed them on to you, Megan, and then I just pretty much do same for the final. Is just and these days, actually, with the book I'm working on right now, Network Effect, I'm not doing any sketches. I'm just starting as a final, which is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, but I kind of lacked the conviction of like thinking of, okay, what's the scene going to be like? Now I can think of the shot a little more cleanly, and so then you can just kind of go for it if you're desperate or feeling brave. One of those two.
I will say, as the owner of Grim Oak Press, and as somebody who's been in this business for 2 decades, I have a lot of Terry Brooks wisdom in my head. I've known Terry a very, very long time, and he was in the entire time I've known him, he's always felt very strongly about artists having, and you both mentioned it earlier, artists having basically skin in the game. Like you guys are just as important bringing a particular scene to life as the words that are on the page, and you should be given that freedom to kind of your vision of what that means come out on the page. And so when I haven't worked with Magali yet professionally. I hope to in the near future, but I really enjoyed working with you, Tommy, because I did enjoy getting those sketches and passing them on to Robin and us both going, wow, he's right on the right direction. This is incredible.
It was timely, I'll say, because Robin, Megan, you were saying that, which of you am I talking to? Megan was saying that if she was to rewrite Wizard now, it might be even darker. And I am so glad that it was written before she realized that, because I was reading it and starting to work on it right when COVID hit big in America. And everyone, there was just in the air, this bleakness, this heaviness. I remember I was going through a lot. I had really bad tendonitis at the time and had been through some severe changes in my life and wasn't really able to work as much. And this was one of the first projects that I was sort of coming back on. And so I was very able to connect with, I don't have a lot of experience with veterans, but other than the ones I know personally, but I was able to really empathize with Wizard's sort of generalized despair and the way that things would morph around him. He'd be like, oh, that light pole's looking at me, or like, just the dark feeling. And a lot of that got channeled into the work. I think the scenes that really spoke to me were these viscerally dark, like and I loved Cassie would tell these stories that he never wanted to hear. And she was telling him this story about this rooster getting butchered, and this kid takes it out and puts it in the woods. And this other kid is like trying to brush up all the feathers so chicken ghosts won't live in the coop. And then his subconscious is telling him, or the villain is telling him, like, you're one of these kids. Like, you're one of the people in the dream. And then like later, Cassie's like, oh, he's asking, was I really, someone in the dream? And Cassie's like, oh yeah, you were there, but you were the black rooster. And like, that's the end of the chapter. And I was just like, oh my God. So I was trying to figure out, how am I going to show this? How am I going to show this? And in the end, like, the most abrupt thing was just to put this huge dead chicken right on the page, right in your face. And I remember my good friend and another fellow illustrator, Mike Epstein, was kind of looking at it, and he was like, geez, that's brutal. And I was like, okay, that means we got it. That's good.
Yeah, the literary aspect of Wizard of the Pigeons. For those of you who haven't read Wizard of the Pigeons, I bet there's a few of you out there. Definitely do so. The prose is so amazing and so beautiful. The story itself does have a significant reason to exist in our canon when it comes to urban fantasy. But I think, Tommy, you captured that literary part of the book in several of your pieces. I liked how you decided some of the characters, they're faceless because it's things that we deal with
like that. Yeah, in stories, when you still leave people the chance to identify the characters for themselves and have their own faces. And with Cassie, it's interesting because her appearance is always changing. So I knew I could show her and not ruin people's impression of what she would look like. And then there were some people like Linda, where she's more like a presence. And so, I didn't want to show, she's not an identity as much as she is like a shell for whatever is happening. She's kind of, and at one point she shows up and he thinks she's Mir, which is the villain. And you can really get people to focus on different things when you take away the face. I kind of have this rule for myself that if there's a face in the picture anywhere, it's a portrait. Everything is about the character, but the character is more of a vehicle when they're faceless in some ways. And so, like specifically also for the Murderbot series, we didn't want to show, we could show other people's faces, but not Murderbot's face. So how do you deal with that? It leads to interesting picture solutions. And I can't remember the author. Someone has said that like the power of a protagonist can be measured by like the weight of the adversaries you throw against them. Kind of like, I think of it as like the Batman rule. Like Batman's not that cool, but Joker's awesome, which makes Batman cool. And Wizard has such an incredible array of things to overcome. And so we're talking about this book being dark, but I think what comes out of that is even more powerful for it. And the abruptness of the book, you're saying you lengthen it, and it's easy to get attached to something as it already exists. But I loved it. I thought it was great. So I'm glad it wasn't changed. And I totally agree that the prose is very wonderful. sort of hauntingly melodic to read. It's almost like reading a sestina or something, where you're getting these waves of and
Yeah.
we tried to put that in the pictures anyway.
Yeah. So I'll turn back to Robin here, and I'm looking at questions here that are popping up on Facebook, and there's been several of the same ones. So I hope to kind of get two roosters dead here with one stone. But so a lot of people have asked, will there be an illustrated version of Mad Ship, or the second Farseer set? Have there been any discussions about that? And if there, you don't have to say yes or no one way or the other, but I figured I'd throw that into your court.
I don't know. It's entirely up to the publisher, and I kind of assume that it will depend on the financial success of the first trilogy in terms of sales, whether they think it's worthwhile to pursue it. So that's entirely a publishing decision that I have no control over.
Okay, that's awesome. I bet Magali would be interested in doing the illustrations for those. Does that happen?
Needless to say.
I'll put you on the hot seat there. And then somebody asked about Wizard and about any kind of continuation to Wizard's story.
I think some story arcs are best. Okay. You tell the most compelling story that exists for that person, and I know you can keep on writing about them, because I do know more of what happened to Wizard after, as well as what happened to Wizard before. But I try not to write a book that I would not write. To write a second book simply because there's a first one is not, in my opinion, the best way to go about it. There has to be a really compelling story that I would really want to write, even if the first book had never existed. So with Wizard, I never close the door completely on that and say I'll never write that again. But at this point, I don't see any continuation of that story.
You're kind of thinking about urban fantasy, though, in the moment. I think I heard you tell me at one point. Yeah, because it's almost, when it comes to urban fantasy, there's such a big play yard. You've written urban fantasy before. I think you were setting maybe a new books in another city.
Oh, I'm playing around in Tacoma this time with Kelsey, and Kelsey has appeared in a couple of shorter stories, one in an anthology, one in the magazine. And eventually I would like to do a novel about Kelsey in Tacoma, but that's down the road a ways.
Okay, cool. Let's see. A lot of people are asking here about movies, of course, because that's how these things go. I haven't seen anything announced about a Fitz and Fool movie of any kind, but wouldn't it be cool if that happened and the movie studio automatically had these great illustrations from Magali to go on? I mean, wouldn't that be great? And then she would have to charge them at least 3% of all box office percentages, right?
It's when a writer is approached for film or television, I think the rate is probably like 90% that it starts out and it chugs along, and then it just kind of all comes apart, and it doesn't move any further. So there have been a couple of times when it was optioned, but an option is simply we'd like to think about making this. So at this point, if there's ever anything to announce, I'll be so happy to announce it. But at this point, I'm just happy it's in a book on a shelf.
Right. Yeah.
Optioning itself is pretty sweet, though, right? Like they pay you a decent little chunk to say we want to think about it.
The first time I optioned Wizard of the Pigeons, I got $100.
Oh.
Wow. Look at you, high roller.
This was back probably in about 3 or 4 years after it was published. So yeah.
So that's at least like $200 in today's money.
Like that. And sometimes the option just goes out there for $1, and then because it is just an option, and then your agent takes the 15 or 20 cents and you get like 80 cents. So
Somebody asks, and this is a good question. I'm fairly good friends with artist Todd Lockwood, and he actually happens to live like 4 miles away from me, so I see him often. I know how he works. I know he works in a very old version of Corel, or no, Painter. Yeah, Painter. He works in a very old version of Painter. So I'm wondering about our artists here, since you're both digital artists, what machine and what software do you prefer to use?
I'll let Magali take this one away.
I'm working with an iMac and this huge thing here. It's a very...
Same one?
Oh yeah, we got my friend.
Yeah, woo! Go Team Intuos.
It's such a go-to option for artists and all. And I also have one of the things you have in the back here, which you can draw on the actual screen and all. But I really do prefer the black thing I have here and looking at my screen like that. So it's just an option for me. It's, you know, and I'm using Photoshop, like, I mean, lots of illustrators, I guess.
Yeah, Photoshop seems to be pretty much the industry standard. You can make the art in anything because really it comes down so much more to principles. But I don't even find, I mean, the painting part of Photoshop has really not improved that much. I have people I talk with sometimes, like Lake Hurwitz is an illustrator who is now in-house at Wizards of the Coast, I think on the world team or maybe running the world team. And like Lake can just, anytime they release a new tool, he figures out how to use it instantly and is making beautiful work with it. I feel like I have so much to learn just about, like in Photoshop, if you hit B, you get the brush tool. There's so much to learn just about the brush tool still for me that I find the technology doesn't help me that much. So I'm not even on there's like a creative cloud version of it where they update and you pay a subscription. When I was in school, I got Creative Suite 4. I bought all of it on like the student discount, and that's what I still use.
Really?
They haven't added anything since then that I was like, oh, I need to make the change for this. There's a few plugins that I use, like one that gives me like a color picker window that sits open all the time that I can just tap and change colors really quickly, because I find otherwise all versions of Photoshop without that add-on, they kind of inhibit you from wanting to change colors. And so it's very easy for your work to come out kind of gray because you're picking off the palette itself, like you're picking colors off the canvas you already have, or there's just this mental disincentive to do certain things in the program. So you have to make sure you overcome those problems. But yeah, the old software is fine. Photoshop doesn't need a big graphics card or anything. Like I have a friend who was looking for a new computer and he was like, I don't know what graphics card to get. And I was like, well, this is what I use. He just started laughing out loud. He was like, that's like an antique. It's laughably outdated. You can even play World of Warcraft with that. And I was like, oh, well, that's lucky because all I do with it is paint in Photoshop, so it works for me. So it's nice because as computers get cheaper and cheaper and better, my costs just go down because I don't need new stuff. I need new ideas and to be better at painting. But the tech you can kind of do with whatever. I mean, I'm sure that, and obviously Todd's doing great with that old version of Painter.
Yeah. I wrote a new book a couple of years ago called The Tempered Steel of Antiquity Gray, and it needed a map. Right. And I'm not an artist in the sense of how you guys go about doing it. But I used to dabble around when I was a teenager and stuff and enjoyed it a lot. Because I own Grimo Press, I needed Adobe Creative Suite because I not only need Photoshop and Adobe Acrobat for PDF making and altering and stuff, but I needed InDesign too. So I do pay that subscription every year. But when it came to the map, one of my early readers said, it'd be nice if you had a map. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay, well, I don't want to pay somebody to do this because I have the map in my head.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll dust off my skills. So I ended up using iPad Pro with Creative Suite on it to do the coastline and the mountains and things like that. And then I just moved that file over to my iMac. I'm an iMac 2 person, and then I did all the color work in there, which I found quite fun. So where I'm going with this is I had fun making my map. When it comes to your map of the 6 Dookies, did you hand draw that out yourself and then the publisher kind of gave that out to somebody to create it, or how did you go about that?
No, they asked me if I were able to make a map, which I wasn't. I never painted a map before, I gotta say, but I pretend that I could. So, because the mere thought that someone else would put their hands on the books was unbearable for me at that time. So, okay, I'm taking the map too. Give it to me. I'm gonna do something. So what I did was I really stayed true to the first version we had. The black and white one we had in the previous books. I didn't change anything to the general shapes and all because I understood it was how it was supposed to be. What I only did was put some blue in the water and some green in the lands and try to make it look, a little more refined and all, but that's all I did. I hope I did well. But yeah, it was a bit of a challenge, and
All right. And when it comes, sorry, Robin, go ahead.
Oh, no, I said it came out very well, very well.
Oh, thank you. It's comforting.
And I'm sorry that I completely mispronounced that name, by the way. Everybody's making fun of me in the chat right now about the map title. I don't think I've ever heard that word used it's like the first time I read The Scions of Shanra by Terry Brooks, I thought it was Scions.
And is it Shanara or Shannara?
All right. Yeah.
Oh, wait. Are we talking about the word duchy?
Yes.
Oh, because when you said Map of the Dookies, because I haven't read it, I was like, that's a funny name. I like
that. No, Dookie means something else. It's Dutchy.
It does. That's why I was like, wow, that's great. Good. Nice writing, Megan. That's awesome.
Were you illustrating, Tommy?
Yeah, my map will probably look about as good as 6 Dookies.
That's funny.
No, I've done a few. My mom's a wonderful fantasy author, and I've done maps for her books. So I'm with Magali. I don't do them often, but I can hack a map when I need to.
Right. Yeah.
You said your mom is a fantasy author. You have to tell me her name.
Her name is, I think her pen name is Katie Arnold.
Okay,
yeah.
I will be that now.
All right.
I was
Awesome.
Yeah,
she was my first client. She paid me to do a book cover when I had no right to do one. And that was actually the first thing I ever got in the Society of Illustrators was my mom's book cover. So we went up there together, and there's like a picture of us standing in front of it. It was very cool.
Oh,
that's wonderful. What I'm hearing from both illustrators is that if you are of any age, not necessarily a kid, but you want to draw fantasy art, any kind of art, you don't need to invest thousands of dollars. You can just get started. And that's wonderful to hear, really, because as a writer, I remember way back when I started out, I had I'm going to betray my age here, a portable Smith Coronomatic typewriter. And, so buying a brand new typewriter ribbon so that it would be nice and clean black on white paper was a big deal. And it was an investment at that age. So hearing that, kids could probably take whatever computer they're working on and use whatever art drawing program is on it to get started. That's wonderful. It puts
and it depends on what kind of art you want to do. I mean, I know, again, I'll mention Lake. Lake does some really beautiful finished illustration in Procreate, which costs like $10 on the App Store, and you can draw right on your iPad. It's an incredible program. I mean, I know some editorial illustrators like Victo Nye do their finished work in that program, and James Jean works in it. And so the technology is not the limit. The limits aren't there. They're in you. That big black hunk of plastic that both me and Magali work on. I remember I traded my 21st birthday trip to Vegas with my dad for that. I was like, I want to be a painter and I need this object, and it's expensive for us. It was expensive. It was like almost $500, I think, at the time. And I didn't have any money and he didn't have any money, but he was going on a business trip to Vegas, and he like managed to get the company to pay for me to go out there too for some reason. It was right at my birthday. And he was like, well, I can get the money back from these things and use it to buy that if you're sure. And I was like, I definitely want to be a digital painter, I'm sure. But the thing has lasted and lasted. And now you can get one of those used on eBay for like $100. So yeah, you can, any way you can get started will work. And drawings just, sorry?
For the longest time at the beginning of my career, I really, like many artists, it took me a while to make an actual living out of my my art. And I remember that my first pen tablet was actually given to me by one of my very first publishers. It was a really old Intuos 2, you know,
Nice.
The thing that was released ages ago, even at that time. And it was already a big one. And I'm not lying, I probably had it in 2007 and only could buy a new one a good 5 to 6 years later. When I really could afford something new, that's one of the first thing I got. But it could have lasted longer than that. So it's really good stuff. And even the smallest version, my husband, who is an illustrator too, he's been an illustrator for 15 years also, and he still has a tiny version of the thing that it's less than $100 actually, and it's working pretty well. So yeah, it's true. It's not really a matter of money now, which is wonderful.
So I have a question for Megan here. One of the early pieces of advice that you gave me early on, this is probably 15 years ago, you told me to write when you can, and it can be on just a note when you're watching your kid playing at the park, or it can, just make the time to do it. Doesn't matter where you're at, doesn't matter what you're using. The artists, they really do have to be with their pen, the paper, pixels, that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about, we're almost at the end here, but can you talk a little bit about how you write now these days? Are you still like kind of, well, I'm over here doing this, and so I'm going to use this piece of paper here, or do you just solely do it on a computer now?
Well, it's on a computer now. I don't use a spiral notebook much anymore. I will still, if I'm out and about and get a wonderful idea, I will grab any scrap of paper and write on it and stuff it back in my bag. I think what happens, what a lot of people don't realize is just because you're not writing doesn't mean you're not writing. If you're out mowing the lawn or taking a shower or doing any number of things, and all that time that the dialogue is going on in your head and the scenes are unrolling and you're saying, would this happen? And no, well, wait a minute, would people logically do that? No, they would do this. And if I were really scared, would I do that, or would I see if I could get out of there? All of that that's going on is just as valid as when you're sitting there and pushing keys down. And if you don't spend a lot of time doing that before you sit down at the keyboard, you'll sit and stare at a blank screen for a long, long, long time. So all of that daydreaming, that laying there before, when you can't sleep at night and you're working on scenes in your head, it's all writing. It's not confined to the time when you're sitting down with a keyboard in front of you.
Right. Yeah.
That's just the same for us too, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't know about Magali's process, but for me, like the more time I can spend thinking on the images before you sit down, the better they turn out. And then a lot of times if you hit a block in the picture, just get up and go. And that's the best solution. That the brain does so much work on it all the time, and not just when you're drawing. I almost feel like that's the most impeded I ever am is when I'm actually producing the thing. So that's cool to hear.
All right, I think we're at the end here. I will say that there have been a lot of comments from people saying how basically the work that all three of you have done in your career thus far has been all amazing. They're all happy that you're here right now. They feel like, one person said, I feel like we're meeting you for the first time, which is kind of cool. So I love that we were able to get together and put this Zoom together. I'm just going to say just my closing words real quick, and then I'll leave it up to you guys. But I'll just say that, the illustrated Assassin's Quest comes out Tuesday in the US. I understand that the UK edition will be delayed for several months here into summer, probably due to COVID and due to finding the right materials needed to produce the book. So I'm just throwing that out there so you guys know that. But in the US, it comes out next week. Congratulations to Robin and Magali for that book. And then for the Illustrated Wizard of the Pigeons, that's available now from, you know, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your favorite bookstore, basically. So definitely, you know, consider buying that. Thank you, Tommy, for all your artwork on that. And thank you, Megan, for allowing Grim Oak Press to publish that book. Again, I think it's an important book. We're actually donating 5% of our proceeds to the National Veterans Foundation for that book. So you're supporting not only a good book and a good author and a good artist, but also our veterans out there that tend to be underrepresented. And yeah, so that's all I'm going to say about that part. I'll leave it up to Megan and the artists for their final words. Thank you both, or thank you all, actually, I should say.
Well, I really want to thank Sean for putting this together. This is, I've been on exactly one Zoom before this, and that was a phone call. So it was more or less 2 or 3 people discussing something. This would not have happened without Sean putting in all the effort, let alone having it go to Facebook Live as well. So thank you, Sean. I am not as terrified as I thought I was going to be. I did go get my hair cut, see? So
And it's lovely.
So I really appreciate all you've put into making this happen. And I appreciate Magali staying up late at night in France and probably far past her normal working hours. And finally getting to meet Tommy face to face, so to speak. So thank you.
Yeah, this has been super nice. I just want to second the thanks to Sean for putting it together. It made it all nice and easy for all of us. Sometimes when people say, "Oh, we want you to do this thing, it'll be nice and easy," they're lying. But with Sean, he's always very serious. He just gets it done. Everything is very casual and great. So this has been just a lot of fun. Pleasure to meet all of you, really face to face in this way. So wonderful.
And there's something I would like to say about the principle of this illustrated edition. I know that being a reader of the trilogy, I know that having an illustrated edition can be kind of intimidating maybe for some readers, because, you know, we all have our vision of the characters, a really strong one, and it's a vision that only belongs to us. And I can understand, because that's a comment I read every now and then, that, you know, people were they were willing to see the illustrations because, you know, it's like making the characters come to life, and then they were kind of reluctant because they thought, oh, what if they are not like what I imagined and all. What I really want people to know is that I really don't want them to think that I think this is the ultimate version. This is not the ultimate Fitz, and this is not the ultimate Fool or whatever. This illustrated edition is just my love letter to the trilogy, just like what any other fan reader would do if they would take a pencil and a brush and all. And of course, I hope people will be happy with that. I put all I had in this trilogy, really like no other project before in my career, but it's just, you know, my vision, nothing more.
Well said. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. This has been so much fun. If you want us to do something similar in the future, we're probably open to that. I can definitely talk to the 3 others here about that. But yeah, thank you for making this a wonderful hour and a little bit more. And I hope you're reading something great. And be safe, stay sane. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.